The wind swept across the barren desert like a restless spirit, carrying with it the scent of sagebrush and dust. Mira Langston tightened the shawl around her shoulders, shielding herself from the stinging grit that whipped through the canyon. The wooden cabin she called home sat alone among jagged mesas, a fragile sanctuary in the vast wilderness. Her morning routine had been interrupted by the sudden cry of a child. At first, she thought it a figment of the wind, a trick her mind played when solitude stretched too long. But the crying persisted, sharp and urgent, echoing off the canyon walls. Mira set down the bundle of firewood she carried and strained her eyes across the dusty expanse. A small figure appeared in the distance, crawling along the cracked earth. Mira's heart leapt. It was a baby, no older than a few months, swaddled in rags and shivering violently. She rushed forward, fear and curiosity mixing in equal measure, and scooped the infant into her arms. "Eli, you poor thing," she whispered, pressing the tiny body to her chest. The baby's cheeks were streaked with dust, lips blue from cold. Mira's instincts took over, her hands moving quickly to unwrap the layers and warm him with her own body heat. She murmured soothing words as she walked back toward the cabin, each step careful against the uneven terrain. As she reached her doorstep, a sudden rustle from the rocks made her spin around. Her breath caught when she saw him, a man, tall and imposing, stepping from the shadows. Kaelen Redhawk. His presence was magnetic, commanding attention without a word. Dark eyes, long black hair, and a bronzed, muscular frame told her he was no ordinary traveler. Tribal jewelry glinted faintly in the sunlight, and the air seemed charged with a quiet, formidable energy. Mira instinctively moved closer to Eli, holding him protectively. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice steady despite the racing of her heart. Kaelen's gaze softened, not with menace, but with something deeper: sorrow, recognition, and an unspoken bond. He did not answer immediately, only stepped closer and lowered himself to her level, eyes lingering on the baby. He is safe?" he asked, his voice low and tinged with awe. "Yes," Mira replied, brushing a hand over Eli's tousled hair. "I found him alone in the canyon." Who are you?" Kaelen's jaw tightened, and he looked away toward the distant mesas. "I am someone who has lost much," he said carefully, "and someone who seeks what was taken from him." Mira frowned, sensing a story behind those words, a history she could not yet fathom. But before she could question further, Eli stirred, crying softly, reaching for her chest. Mira rocked him gently, her eyes meeting Kaelen's again. "There is a connection," Kaelen murmured, almost to himself. "I feel it." Mira's instincts told her he was no ordinary man, and the intensity in his gaze suggested truths unspoken, mysteries entwined with this child's survival. She felt a shiver run down her spine, not from fear, but from the strange, unexplainable sense that Eli's arrival and Kaelen's presence were threads of a destiny that had begun weaving itself long before she had stepped into the desert that morning. The wind howled again, carrying the scent of sage and earth. Mira tightened her hold on Eli, her mind a swirl of questions. Who was Kaelen Redhawk? Why had this child been left alone in the canyon? And most importantly, why did she feel deep in her heart that their lives had just become irrevocably intertwined? Kaelen remained still, eyes never leaving Eli. The silence stretched, punctuated only by the baby's soft whimpers and the whispering desert wind. In that quiet, Mira realized that the day had changed forever and that the arrival of this mysterious man and the fragile child in her arms would alter the course of her life in ways she could not yet imagine. For the first time in years, Mira Langston felt that destiny had arrived at her doorstep, wrapped in a baby's cry and a stranger's intense gaze. And somewhere in the distance, the desert watched, waiting for the next chapter to unfold. The night air settled heavy over Mira Langston's cabin, carrying the scent of sagebrush and the distant heat of the dying sun. Inside, the fire crackled as Mira rocked Eli in her arms, humming softly to calm his restless movements. The soft glow of the flames highlighted the weariness etched into her face, lines carved from years of solitude and hardship. At 30, she was strong, self-reliant, but the presence of the child so small, so fragile, had awakened a tenderness in her she had long denied herself. Outside, the canyon was cloaked in shadows. Mira sensed Kaelen Redhawk still watching, his figure outlined against the jagged rocks, silent as a phantom. Though she had seen him only briefly, his intensity lingered in her mind. There was something almost otherworldly about the way he moved, powerful, yet careful, like a predator attuned to the land and its secrets. Finally, the soft scrape of boots on dirt drew Mira's attention. Kaelen stepped into the firelight, the muscles of his chest and arms taut under the glow, long black hair falling across his shoulders. Tribal jewelry clinked softly as he moved, a rhythm that seemed to echo the heartbeat of the canyon itself. "He's safe," Mira said, her voice steady but wary. "I won't let anyone harm him." Kaelen's eyes, dark and deep as the desert night, softened. He knelt near the fire, keeping a careful distance, his gaze never leaving Eli. "I can see that," he said, his voice a low rumble. "You have cared for him as if he were your own." Mira bristled slightly at the compliment. "I found him abandoned in the desert. I don't know whose child he is. I just couldn't leave him there." Kaelen nodded, almost in reverence. "He is mine, Mira, my son. The spirits guided him to you. They said he would be safe in your care until I found him." Mira froze, the baby stirring against her chest. "Yours?" she echoed. "Why was he left? Who would abandon a child like this?" Kaelen's jaw tightened. Shadows crossed his face as he looked away toward the canyon walls that rose like silent sentinels. "Enemies," he said at last, his voice barely above a whisper. "There are men who would see our people destroyed, and they struck at me when he was born. They took everything, my home, my family. Only he survived." His hands clenched into fists, knuckles whitening. "I searched for him relentlessly, following every whisper, every lead the spirits revealed, and now I have found him with you." The weight of his words settled heavily on Mira. She had faced hardship in her own life. Yes, but the kind of violence Kaelen spoke of was alien to her, raw, merciless and personal. And yet there was a truth in his eyes, a burning sincerity that made her chest tighten. I don't know what to do," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "I've cared for him these past few days, and I've grown attached. I don't know if I can just hand him over." Kaelen's gaze softened further, a hint of vulnerability beneath the fierce exterior. "I don't ask for him to be taken from you. I only ask that you let me be near him, to protect him, to guide him as he grows. He has two mothers now, the woman who nurtured him and the bloodline he carries." Mira felt a strange warmth bloom in her chest, a mixture of relief and unease. She had always known that her life could never be ordinary. Yet the arrival of Kaelen and the truth of Eli's origin made everything feel larger, more dangerous, more alive. For a long moment, the two of them sat in silence, the only sounds the crackle of the fire and the soft sighs of Eli. The desert around them seemed to listen, holding its breath as if waiting for the next move. Finally, Kaelen stood, the firelight glinting off the tribal ornaments around his neck and arms. "I will not leave, Mira, not while he is here. I will remain at the edge of the canyon until you are ready to accept that he is mine and that I am his protector." Mira studied him carefully, her mind spinning with questions. Could she trust him? Could she allow herself to welcome a stranger into her life, even one so undeniably powerful and honorable? And yet, Something deep inside told her that Kaelen Redhawk was not just any man. He was a force of nature, a guardian, and perhaps, in some mysterious way, the key to Eli's survival. As the fire burned low, Mira whispered to the baby, "You have come to us for a reason, little one, and I will do everything to protect you, even if it means sharing my heart with a man I barely know." Outside, Kaelen watched, the canyon wind lifting strands of his hair as he surveyed the landscape, a silent promise lingering in his dark eyes. He would guard Eli at all costs, and perhaps in time, he would find a place in Mira's heart as well. The night stretched long and uncertain. But one thing was clear: life in Red Rock Canyon had shifted, and nothing would ever be the same. The desert was quiet that morning, the kind of silence that presses against your ears and makes every sound feel sudden and alarming. Mira Langston moved with care, carrying Eli outside to the small garden she tended behind the cabin. The baby gurgled happily, reaching for the bright morning sun as it reflected off the rugged mesas. Mira smiled, but a shadow lingered in her mind, the memory of Kaelen Redhawk, watching them from the edge of the canyon last night. When she returned inside to fetch water for the baby, she found him already there, leaning against the doorway, arms crossed. The firelight had long faded, but the early sun glinted off his bronzed skin and the glimmer of tribal jewelry around his neck and arms. Even in the soft morning light, he seemed formidable, untamed, a living embodiment of the canyon itself. "Good morning," Mira said cautiously. "You slept outside again?" Kaelen shook his head. "I stayed near the ridge," he said. "I wanted to watch over him without disturbing you. He is precious. I cannot risk letting anything harm him." Mira studied him, noting the weariness in his stance, the faint shadows under his eyes. There was more to Kaelen than the warrior she had glimpsed, something deeper, more tragic. She decided to probe gently. "Kaelen, you said enemies took everything from you. What happened? Why was your son abandoned?" Kaelen's jaw tightened. He leaned forward, resting his hands on his knees, and his eyes darkened. "It was years ago, before the boy was born," he began, voice low and tense. "Our camp was attacked at night. Raiders came from the north, men who hated my people, seeking to destroy our families and take our land. My wife, my beloved. She did not survive. They struck without mercy. I was out hunting when it happened. I returned to find only smoke and silence, and then she gave birth in hiding, but I was too late, my child. They took him." Mira's hands tightened around the water bucket. Her heart ached for him, for the raw grief in his voice. "But he survived," she said softly. "The spirits, as you said, guided him to me." Kaelen nodded, the edge of sorrow softening only slightly. "Yes, I followed every whisper, every rumor of his survival. For years I tracked him across the plains, through towns and deserts, until finally, he was here in your care." His gaze flicked to Eli, who cooed and wriggled in Mira's arms. "And now I will not let him go again. Not ever." Mira felt a strange mix of fear and admiration. Kaelen's intensity was intimidating, yet there was an undeniable sincerity in his words. She had always been cautious about trusting anyone, especially a stranger with such power and presence. But she could not deny the connection that seemed to grow between the warrior and the child, or between Kaelen and herself. Their uneasy peace was shattered later that afternoon. Mira was repairing a broken fence when she noticed dust clouds rising along the distant ridge. She squinted and saw a group of riders approaching fast, their silhouettes menacing against the scorching sun. Panic surged through her, and she grabbed Eli, running toward the cabin. Kaelen was already there, his presence commanding, muscles tensing as he sized up the threat. "They've come for him," he said grimly, his hand brushing against the hilt of a knife strapped to his side. I can feel it." They never stopped searching. The riders drew closer, shouting insults and threats. Mira felt the weight of fear pressing on her chest, but Kaelen stepped forward, positioning himself between the cabin and the attackers. His bare chest glistened in the sun, his tribal jewelry clinking faintly as he moved. He was both terrifying and awe-inspiring. A force of nature standing against the storm. Mira realized with a sudden clarity that Kaelen was not just a protector, he was a part of something larger. Something tied to the land, to history, to the very survival of his people. And now, by extension, he was protecting her and Eli as well. As the riders neared the edge of the cabin, Kaelen let out a sharp whistle, and the wind seemed to shift as if carrying his command. The attackers faltered, their horses skidding in the dust, uncertain of the strange, almost mystical force emanating from the warrior. Mira's heart pounded. She had never seen anything like its strength, precision, and an unspoken power that belonged to the desert itself. Kaelen met her eyes briefly, a silent promise passing between them. "Stay inside with him," he said. "I will handle this." Mira clutched Eli to her chest, tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. She had never known danger like this, nor had she ever imagined a man like Kaelen Redhawk would become entwined with her life. And yet, as the dust swirled and the shadow of confrontation loomed, she realized something extraordinary. In the heart of the desert, amid danger and loss, a bond was forming, one that would shape their lives forever. The canyon held its breath, waiting for the storm to break. The afternoon sun beat down relentlessly, casting long shadows across the dusty canyon floor. Mira Langston clutched Eli tighter, feeling the rhythm of his tiny heartbeat against her chest. She could hear the approaching riders now, the thundering of hooves, a drumbeat of imminent danger. Her pulse raced, and for the first time in her life, she truly feared for their lives. Kaelen Redhawk stood in front of the cabin, bare-chested, his long black hair tumbling over his bronzed shoulders. Tribal jewelry glinted in the harsh sunlight, and the muscles along his arms and chest rippled as he shifted weight from foot to foot. His eyes, dark and unwavering, were fixed on the advancing riders. He exuded a presence that was both magnetic and terrifying, a force of nature that seemed to draw the very wind to his command. "They won't stop," Mira whispered, almost to herself. "They want him." Kaelen's gaze softened briefly as it met hers, a silent reassurance passing between them. "Stay inside. Keep him safe," he said, voice low and commanding. "I will handle this." The riders came closer, their figures indistinct in the swirling dust. They were rough men, faces weathered by sun and cruelty, their intent clear. Kaelen's hand hovered near the knife at his belt. But it was not his blade that would protect them, it was the precision, the skill, and the almost supernatural control he held over the battlefield. A sharp whistle cut through the desert air, and the wind seemed to answer him. The horses faltered, uneasy, and the riders squinted against the sudden shift. Kaelen stepped forward, his movements fluid, almost ritualistic, like a dance passed down from generations of warriors. Every muscle in his body was coiled for action. Yet there was a grace to his motion that made him appear larger than life, more than just a man. Mira pressed Eli against her chest, watching in awe and fear as Kaelen moved among the riders. He didn't strike immediately. He let them come close, reading their intentions with an almost uncanny awareness. Then, with a burst of speed, he intercepted the lead rider, using his momentum to unseat him and send him tumbling into the dust. The other men hesitated, unsure how to react to a man who seemed both human and elemental. From inside the cabin, Mira's breath caught. She had never seen violence like this, swift, precise, and merciless when necessary, yet controlled. Kaelen was a whirlwind, striking with calculated force, moving like a shadow over the sunlit ground. Every motion was purposeful, Every glance, every stance, conveyed that he was a protector, a guardian, and a force no enemy could easily challenge. The standoff ended as suddenly as it began. The riders, shaken and intimidated, began to retreat, murmuring curses under their breath. Kaelen did not chase them. Instead, he returned to Mira and Eli, his chest heaving, hair matted from exertion but eyes still sharp and vigilant. Mira stepped outside the cabin cautiously, holding Eli close. "You saved us," she whispered, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and admiration. "I didn't know anyone could fight like that. Not even in stories." Kaelen knelt down, his gaze softening as he looked at the baby. "He is strong," he said, "but he is still fragile. And the world is not always kind. I cannot let anyone harm him." Mira studied him, feeling a pull she could not explain. There was something almost magnetic about Kaelen, a combination of strength, honor, and vulnerability that made her heart quicken. "Why are you so devoted?" she asked softly. Kaelen's eyes met hers, dark pools of emotion. "Because he is my son. Because I have lost everything before. I will not lose him again. And because you cared for him when I could not. You gave him life when the world tried to take it away." Mira's hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the baby in her arms. "I only did what felt right," she said. "But I've never met anyone like you. You're extraordinary." Kaelen stood slowly, brushing dust from his pants. "And you, Mira Langston, are extraordinary too. Strong, compassionate, unafraid. Even in the face of fear. The boy was meant to be with you. And perhaps I was meant to be here as well." The desert around them seemed to exhale, the wind sweeping across Redhawk Ridge like a sigh of relief. Mira looked at Kaelen, then at Eli, then back to the canyon that had become their battleground and sanctuary. In that moment, she realized that her life had changed irrevocably. Danger, mystery, and a man unlike any other had entered her world, and there was no turning back. The shadows lengthened, and the canyon fell into a tense silence. But Mira knew one truth with certainty. As long as Kaelen Redhawk stood watch, and as long as she held Eli close, they would face whatever the desert threw at them together. Night fell over Redhawk Ridge, draping the canyon in a blanket of deep indigo. Stars glittered like scattered diamonds, and the soft call of coyotes echoed through the still desert air. Mira Langston sat by the fire outside her cabin. Eli nestled against her chest, his soft breaths rising and falling in rhythm with her own. She could feel the lingering tension from the afternoon's confrontation. Though Kaelen had protected them, she knew danger could return at any moment. Kaelen Redhawk approached silently from the ridge, the flicker of firelight reflecting off his bronzed skin and tribal jewelry. The muscles of his chest and arms gleamed under the starlight, long black hair cascading over his shoulders. Mira noticed how the firelight caught in his dark eyes, revealing a mixture of resolve, sorrow, and something deeper, something almost spiritual. "Mira," Kaelen said softly, kneeling near the fire. Eli stirred, reaching for him, and Kaelen extended a hand with a gentleness that contrasted sharply with his fierce exterior. "May I?" Mira nodded, allowing him to cradle the baby. Eli cooed softly, his tiny fingers brushing Kaelen's chest. Mira's heart tightened. There was an undeniable connection between the child and the warrior, a bond that went beyond biology, beyond mere protection. "There is more you must know," Kaelen began, his voice low, almost reverent. "Eli, he is not just any child. He carries the blood of our people, yes, but also a prophecy. The elders spoke of a child born under the red moon, who would carry the strength of generations and the spirit of the land itself. He would be a bridge between worlds, between those who walk the earth and those who watch from the shadows." Mira blinked, unsure whether to believe him. "A prophecy?" she asked, her voice a mixture of awe and skepticism. "You mean like a legend?" Kaelen shook his head. "It is no legend, Mira. It is a truth. From the moment he was born, the spirits guided him. That is why he survived when others would have perished. That is why he came to you. The spirits knew he needed a mother who would nurture him, teach him strength, and shield him from those who would do him harm." Mira felt warmth flood through her chest. Her life had been quiet, isolated, defined by routine and survival, yet here she was, cradling a child who could change the course of destiny. She had always imagined motherhood as a distant dream, and now it was thrust upon her in the most extraordinary way. "Kaelen," she whispered, voice trembling, I don't know if I'm ready for this. For him, for all of it." Kaelen's eyes softened, and he placed a reassuring hand over hers. "No one is ever ready for what fate demands," he said gently. "But you have already proven yourself. You saved him. You nurtured him. You gave him a life when the world tried to take it. That is enough. That is why he calls you Mother." Mira's breath caught at his words. The baby in her arms gurgled, reaching toward her face as if confirming Kaelen's claim. She realized then that this was not just about survival, it was about trust, love, and the bond that formed when two souls met a higher purpose. Kaelen leaned back slightly, his gaze sweeping over the canyon. "The threats are not gone," he continued. "Those who hunted my son before are still out there. But now with you, we are stronger. We can face them together." Mira studied him, the weight of their situation settling on her shoulders. Yet, in that moment, she felt a surge of courage. Kaelen was formidable, yes, but she had proven her own strength in caring for Eli. Perhaps together, they could navigate the dangers that lay ahead. The fire crackled softly between them, a small beacon of warmth against the cool night. Mira whispered to Eli, "You are meant for something greater, little one. And I will stand by you, no matter what comes." Kaelen's dark eyes met hers, and for the first time, Mira saw a flicker of vulnerability beneath his warrior's exterior. "And I will protect him," he said firmly. "But I will also protect you, Mira. The spirits guided me to you as well." A hush fell over Redhawk Ridge as the night embraced them. Mira felt the enormity of what lay ahead, yet she also felt a strange peace. Eli's small life had intertwined with theirs, and together they formed a bond that was unbreakable. The desert stretched endlessly around them, full of shadows, danger, and mystery, but now they would face it as a family dot and in the quiet. Mira understood that destiny had chosen them all for something extraordinary. The morning sun cast pale gold across Redhawk Ridge, but the serenity was deceptive. Mira Langston had been awake for hours, rocking Eli in her arms, listening to the whispering winds that carried both promise and warning. The events of the past days weighed heavily on her, the abandoned child, the sudden arrival of Kaelen Redhawk, and the terrifying confrontation with the riders. Something told her that the danger was far from over. Kaelen moved silently outside, scanning the canyon with sharp, unyielding eyes. His muscular, shirtless frame, long black hair, and tribal jewelry glimmered faintly in the morning sun, every movement a careful balance of strength and grace. Mira watched him from the cabin doorway, a strange mix of admiration and unease filling her. There was a raw power about him, a connection to the land and the child that was both comforting and unnerving. "Kaelen," Mira called softly, holding Eli close. "Do you think they'll come back?" Kaelen's dark eyes never left the horizon. "They always return," he said, his voice low, carrying the weight of experience. "Those who seek to harm Eli will not rest until they have tried every path." "But we are ready." Mira shivered slightly, though not from the cold. There was something about the way Kaelen spoke, his certainty, that made the desert itself seem alive. She felt drawn to him, not just because of his strength, but because she sensed the depth of his devotion, not only to Eli but now to her as well. Suddenly, a distant cry shattered the morning stillness. Mira clutched the baby instinctively, her heart hammering. Dust rose on the horizon, and Mira could make out figures on horseback approaching fast. Her pulse spiked. Kaelen's eyes narrowed, and he moved with terrifying precision. Every muscle in his body coiled, his bare feet barely making a sound on the rocky ground as he positioned himself between Mira and the threat. "They've come," he muttered, more to himself than to her. "And this time, they will not retreat." The riders drew closer, a rough band of men with hardened faces and dark eyes. Kaelen's gaze swept over them like a hawk sizing up prey. With a swift motion, he picked up a long spear from the ground, spinning it effortlessly as he approached the nearest rider. The weapon flashed in the sunlight, a blur of lethal grace. Mira felt her breath catch. She had never witnessed such a display of skill. Kaelen moved with the precision of a predator, every step calculated, every strike purposeful. Yet he fought with restraint, aiming to disarm and intimidate rather than kill unnecessarily. It was clear to Mira that his strength was not just physical, it was rooted in something far older. A connection to the spirits of his people, the land, and the child he had sworn to protect. The attackers faltered, confusion spreading among them as Kaelen's presence seemed to command the very wind and dust. Horses reared, riders shouted, and yet Kaelen remained calm, unwavering. Mira held Eli tightly, watching the scene unfold with awe and fear. She realized that he was not just a protector in the ordinary sense. He was a force of nature, a guardian shaped by loss, devotion, and destiny. When the riders finally retreated, defeated more by Kaelen's presence than by direct combat, Mira exhaled a shaky breath. Kaelen returned to her side, spear in hand, dust coating his skin and hair. He knelt beside them, brushing Eli's soft hair from his forehead. "They will return," he said quietly, "but each time they will face me. I will not let them take him or you from this place." Mira's eyes glistened with tears, a mixture of relief, fear, and growing admiration. I don't know what to say," she whispered. "You risk so much. For a child you've just found, and for me." Kaelen's gaze softened, and for a fleeting moment, the fierce warrior gave way to the man beneath. "Because you cared for him when I could not," he said, voice gentle yet firm. "Because you have shown the courage and love that the spirits themselves demand. You are his mother, Mira, and perhaps something more." The baby stirred in her arms, gurgling softly as if affirming Kaelen's words. Mira felt a profound sense of purpose settle over her. Her life, once quiet and solitary, had been thrust into a destiny she could scarcely imagine, but she would not falter. Not now, not with Eli in her arms, and not with Kaelen by her side. The desert stretched endlessly around them, full of danger, mystery, and uncertainty. Yet Mira knew, for the first time, that together they could face whatever came. And as the sun climbed higher over Redhawk Ridge, the bond between them, warrior, mother and child, grew stronger, unbroken, and unshakable. The sun dipped low behind Redhawk Ridge, turning the canyon into a fiery landscape of red and gold. Mira Langston sat on the cabin steps, Eli cradled gently in her arms, feeling the steady rise and fall of his tiny chest. The events of the past days, the baby's arrival, Kaelen's fierce protection, the mysterious threats from unknown enemies, had brought them to a point she could scarcely have imagined. Every moment carried weight, every shadow could hide danger. Kaelen Redhawk moved at the edge of the ridge, muscular, shirtless, long black hair falling over his shoulders, tribal jewelry catching the sunlight, every movement precise and watchful. Mira could feel his presence even from a distance, a silent shield around her and Eli. She had come to trust him completely, not only as a warrior but as a man who had risked everything for her and the child. "Kaelen," she whispered softly, adjusting Eli in her arms. "Do you think it's over?" Kaelen's dark eyes scanned the horizon, alert and unwavering. "It is never truly over," he said. "But tonight we will face them. And tonight we protect what is ours, what destiny has chosen." The wind shifted, carrying with it the sound of hooves. Mira stiffened. Out of the canyon shadows emerged a small band of riders, the remnants of those who had tried to take Eli before. Their faces were set, hardened by greed and malice. They did not know Kaelen Redhawk. They did not know the desert itself seemed to obey him. Kaelen stepped forward, spear in hand, his stance commanding. Mira felt her heart race, but also a strange calm. She knew he would not let harm come to them. "Stay inside with him," he said, nodding toward the cabin. "No matter what happens, Eli is safe with you." Mira obeyed, retreating into the cabin doorway but keeping Eli close. From there, she watched as Kaelen met the riders. He was a force of nature, each movement precise and powerful, muscles rippling as he blocked, parried, and disarmed his opponents. The air around him seemed to crackle with authority and energy, as though the spirits of the canyon itself had lent him strength. The fight was swift but decisive. Kaelen's sheer skill, combined with an almost otherworldly awareness, left the attackers scrambling. One by one, they faltered, retreating in fear. And when the last of them fled, dust swirling in their wake, Kaelen stood alone, spear in hand, chest heaving from exertion but eyes still watchful. Mira emerged from the cabin, Eli resting in her arms, and approached Kaelen slowly. You saved him," she whispered, tears of relief and awe welling in her eyes. "You saved us both." Kaelen's dark gaze softened as he knelt beside her, resting a hand gently on Eli's back. "No one can harm him now," he said, voice low and steady. "The prophecy, the spirits, they guided us here. Eli is meant to live, to grow strong, and to bridge worlds. And together we will ensure it." Mira studied him, feeling a deep surge of gratitude and affection. "I don't know how to thank you, Kaelen. You risked everything for a child you barely knew." "For me," Kaelen's lips curved into a faint smile, rare and fleeting. "Because you cared for him when I could not. Because you are brave, and because the spirits chose you both. We are a family now, Mira, not by blood, but by love and by destiny." Eli stirred, reaching for Kaelen's chest. Mira's heart swelled. She realized that the bond between them, warrior, mother, and child, was unbreakable. The desert, once a vast and lonely expanse, now felt like a sanctuary, a witness to their courage, love, and resilience. As the last light of the sun faded behind the mesas, Mira looked into Kaelen's eyes and knew that life in Red Rock Ridge would never be ordinary again. Together, they would face the mysteries, dangers, and challenges that the desert held. But together, they were unstoppable. The canyon held its breath as night fell, quiet except for the soft coos of Eli. Mira Langston, Kaelen Redhawk, and their child had survived, united not only by circumstance but by choice, courage, and love. Destiny had brought them together, and now it had granted them a future filled with hope, strength, and the promise of new beginnings. Under the starlit sky, Mira whispered to Eli, "You are safe now, little one, and we will protect you. Always." Kaelen stood beside her, his hand brushing hers, eyes scanning the horizon, the eternal guardian of the child, the woman, and the desert itself. In that moment, the canyon felt alive with possibility, and a quiet peace settled over Red Rock Ridge, signaling the beginning of a new chapter for their extraordinary family.